And we're live. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you
Hello.
are doing well. We're here for our book session. And so while we're kind of like waiting to get people to join, I would just like to share a few updates from Kind Theory. We are hosting a couple of, well, not couple of, two events, in-person events in McKinney, Texas. One of them is being graciously hosted by a business named as Painting with a Twist. And they're hosting this event, Painting with a Purpose for Kind Theory. It's a fun, artsy, creative class. You get to paint sunflowers. And it's a family friendly event. And part of the proceeds will go to Kind Theory. So I'm really, really excited about this event. And our team is going to be there painting right there with you all. So if you have any questions, you can come attend the event, have fun, and well, you get to take the painting with you as well. So that's a win-win situation. We have second event on April 28th. Um, that's a larger one that I'm really, really excited about. Um, the event is celebrating neurodiversity. It's a luncheon slash sort of an educational event in honor of autism acceptance. We're going to be sharing some resources and education on how to view autism from a lens of neurodiversity. And one of our slogans for the event is from the Underdogs. And that's one of my favorite slogans. And I'm not sure if Rolfe is here listening. It's one of his favorite slogans too, and that's United by Differences. So enough from me. I'm not going to bore you guys, but autism, dyslexia, anxiety, and a million cloned enemies, the Underdogs have returned this season. And so Chris and I think Aman was in the last session with Chris, and they did chapter 1 and 2 together. Hey,
And the
Aman.
prologue.
Yes. We miss you, Aman. If you want to join in, please do join in. And Steph is here too. Hey, Steph.
Yay.
Um,
Hello.
Go ahead, Chris. Take the mic.
Okay. So, previously on Underdogs Tooth and Nail. So, the prologue was Oliver Roth catching up on the events of the first novel and then watching a clone explode because there's this new technology that they're trying to finalize called AME, atmospheric metallurgic excitation, which is basically a force field that accepts organic material but blows up anything made of metal. In chapter 1, we had Kate and Raj sat outside Spitfire's Rise thinking about Kate's older brother James on his birthday. And we don't know where James is, whether he's even alive. He's hopefully, or whether he's met up with his and Kate's parents. He's hopefully somewhere in New London, New London's inner city prison. And just while they're thinking about that, there's a missile attack on New London, which is completely wiped out by the Cerberus missile defense system. Everything's completely fine, but it's likely to be the rest of the world's last gasp attempt at destroying Nicholas Grant before he starts raising these metal-proof force fields. And then there's chapter 2, where Ewan and Shannon going out on her first mission as a new underdog. Oh yeah, and Ewan and Shannon are getting quite close as well. You can probably see where this is going. They went on a mission to find out where the AME test center is, and it's Oakenfold Special School. And yeah, Ewan is not best pleased about that, and he knows that his Oakenfold friends are not going to be particularly happy either. And as if that wasn't enough, chapter 2 ended with them getting home and McCormick has collapsed on the floor for unspecified reasons. You're just about to find out what it's all about, but yeah, that's the more I think about more I think about it, the more absolutely chaotic the opening 3 chapters to Tooth and Nail are. That they're nearly the most chaotic opening chapters in the series. Nearly. We're not going to talk about acceleration yet. Anyway, so chapter 3. Throughout Ewan's life, his first reaction to emotional hurt had always been anger, whether it had been students setting him off or idiot teachers asserting their authority with pointing and loud voices. Anger had always been his go-to state of mind. But with McCormick out of sight in the clinic, His anger was nowhere to be found. All he felt was fear, and lots of it. It was barely midday, but the boy's bedroom was packed. A crowd of people had found various excuses to be there. Nobody mentioned the little fact that McCormick and Lorraine could be heard arguing through the walls of the clinic. But each person had sat themselves as close to that side of the room as possible. Presumably, on the other side of the clinic, Kate, Shannon, and Gracie were doing the same in the girls' bedroom. "No, Joseph," came a muffled yell. "I will not do that to you." Well, he's still awake at least, Ewan thought. The relief when McCormick had woken up on the living room floor had nearly reduced Ewan to tears. The man had tried to get to his feet too early, and a flurry of hands had struggled to keep him upright as he stood. Ewan's memories of what had happened next were a blur, but Lorraine had sat McCormick on the sofa and asked a bunch of questions. Most of his answers had been along the lines of, "Don't worry, I'm fine." At some point, he had been helped up the stairs to the clinic with a full pint of water in his hand. McCormick did not appear to be in immediate danger, but people didn't collapse without reason. And as Kate so often said, the worst part of any worry was not knowing the truth. "I don't care about the chain of command," Lorraine continued, "and you bloody well know it. I'm the woman with the scalpel. I decide where it goes." Ewan was used to Lorraine being blunt and uncompromising, but this wasn't defiance. It was fear, just like his own. "What's she talking about?" asked Thomas at his side, his little nose pushed against the wall and his voice unusually wavy by his regular chirpy standards. Ewan shushed him. The 9-year-old's anxiety may have been more visible, but it was no more severe than Ewan's. Ewan was just better at pretending not to be frightened. "Scalpel?" asked Raj. "She's not thinking of operating, is she?" "I don't know," answered Ewan, "because people keep bloody talking." That shut everyone up. Of all the people in the room, the lad with the Asperger's diagnosis was the only one who knew what to do. Jack Hopper was as quiet as a dead church mouse, with one hand cupping his ear against the wall and his eyes forming their strongest expression of concentration. Once in a while, he even brushed his dishevelled hair away from his ear. Every sound wave mattered. Ewan imitated Jack's pose and hoped it would reveal some extra words. "What you're asking is terrifying," Lorraine continued. "I can't put it any... No, it's not my personal fears getting in the way of the greater good. I'm not that selfish. The greatest good is keeping you alive, and cutting you open would..." A pause, and inaudible words from McCormick. "Then go out there and see what they think," Lorraine yelled. "If this goes like I think it will, they'll lose the most important figure in their lives." McCormick spoke again. He muttered something about defeating the object. "Is McCormick going to die?" wailed Thomas. Ewan decided it was the wrong time to shush him. "I don't think so," he replied. Hardly the reassurance the boy would have wanted, but it was against Ewan's nature to make false promises. "He'll be fine, don't worry," said Raj with a smile. Ewan bit his lip, but said nothing. Whatever else McCormick said, nobody had heard it, not even Jack. Even in moments of intense emotion, even with a friend as close as Lorraine losing herself in front of him, his voice never rose. The only clue that he had finished was that Lorraine started to talk again. "Of course I'm afraid," she said. "I've had friends die in this room. I watched Callum die when his insulin ran out, and Roy with his cancer. I'm not cutting you up for anything, and especially not for you to go and get yourself killed in battle." The last couple of words distracted Ewan from remembering 13-year-old Callum Turner's existence. It had been a long year, and even to Oakenfold they hadn't talked much. Oh, Callum Turner was the second underdog to die. He lasted a week before, like you just heard, his insulin ran out. He was the one who came up with the phrase, "the problems are not the person," like the Underdogs motto. But he's been dead for nearly but not quite a year now. "Battle? He's not..." Lorraine can operate, right?" asked Thomas. "Wasn't that her job in the old days?" "She was a nurse, not a surgeon," said Raj. "Massive difference." "Do operations hurt?" "Not really. They put you to sleep first. I had an operation on my spine when I was 12, and I didn't feel like..." Shh! Silence fell again, but it was too late. Lorraine had started to sob, and her voice became a whisper. Ewan had never seen Lorraine cry, but had heard her a couple of times. Most recently when Roy had passed away, from a type of stomach cancer that could have been dealt with easily in a real hospital. She had not been seen outside the clinic for 2 or 3 days after that. But she never really talked about her troubles. Ewan wondered whether this habit came from the fact that her housemates were often her patients too. Lorraine had gone for so many years hiding her emotions while on the wards that perhaps she naturally hid them at Spitfire's Rise. But it must have been more complicated than that. Emotions always were. Because Roy had been her friend, just about the only man her age to have made it to Spitfire's Rise. And underneath her bossy exterior, she probably cared about the teenagers a great deal. She had certainly cared about Shannon when they first met. Maybe she sees herself as more than the nurse, Ewan thought. She has responsibility over who lives and who dies here. The pressure on her is enormous, and she's probably already crushed by the memories of people she couldn't save. No wonder she doesn't want to operate on McCormick. End of scene. Quick drink. According to Ewan's watch, only 2 hours had passed. He had to check Kate's watch at his side to make sure his batteries weren't dying. Oh yeah, a bit of a continuity error because Kate's watch runs out of batteries in book 1, and at some point after this point, she makes a comment about how she hasn't found batteries yet. So, whoops. Lorraine had surfaced long enough to shout the words "meeting downstairs" into the boys' bedroom and allowed the news to spread by itself. The living room was full now, 10 people in total. All the surviving residents of Spitfire's Rise, minus the 2 in the clinic. Ewan looked across the remaining underdogs. It was rare to see all of them in the same room at the same time, and with so many Oakenfold students together, it almost felt like being in a classroom again. Alex was perhaps the least comfortable person present, the only 20-something in a room where nobody else had reached 18. Well, except for Mark. Mark had reached 18. Wait, that no way is that like 2 continuity errors in 3 paragraphs. I'm going to make a note of that because, funnily enough, we're just about to lead up to a reprint of this, and there's an opportunity to correct little mistakes. So, usually 3 paragraph.
You truly are an author.
An autistic attention to detail author.
Yes.
Nobody else had reached 18. Okay, notes made. I shall send that in an email just when I get the chance. Okay, but yeah, for the record, Mark is 18. Suddenly, the unexpected happened. Dr. McCormick, who had been face down and unconscious on the same carpet hours earlier, walked into the living room with a broad smile. Perhaps he had misjudged the atmosphere, or maybe he was trying to reassure people. Either way, the rest of the underdogs had no idea how to react. Thomas had his hands up as if ready to applaud. Silent Simon had his jaw gaped open, his breathing audible. Raj shifted towards the edge of his seat as if being closer would help him to hear. Lazy Gracie gave the most generic reaction possible, trying to blend in with everyone else. Mark looked up in vague curiosity, either unaffected by the day's events or pretending to be. Afternoon, McCormick said softly. First things first, I'm feeling much better and you don't need to worry. Cough, load of rubbish, cough, said Jack. A ruder set of words had crossed Ewan's mind, but he chose not to say them. But you obviously deserve an explanation, McCormick continued, without offering Jack any response. My sister's been acting up. I've had it in my abdomen for the last 30 years, and normally the pain is bearable. That said, my lifestyle hasn't exactly been healthy this last year, and something or other must have changed in there. Is there a more scientific explanation? Asked Alex. I'm a mathematician, not a biologist. Even Lorraine is struggling, but we both agree I'm better off without it inside me. Concerned faces in the crowd began to look at each other. A couple looked at Ewan as if he could do anything. They only reminded him of his own powerlessness. As with everything else in life that lay beyond his control, it grated horribly against his nerves. Didn't sound like you were agreeing, said Raj. We didn't agree on how to get it out, as I'm assuming you heard. Lorraine's idea was to hold out until the end of the war and leave it to a real surgeon once we have hospitals again. But I think that's just avoiding the issue. In the end, we came to an agreement. Anyway, this meeting isn't about me. There are more urgent matters at hand. Ewan blinked himself back to reality. For several minutes, he had forgotten anything existed outside of McCormick and his health issues. The man leaned back against the nearest wall, the way he sometimes did when yielding the floor to another speaker. Kate, he said, could you describe what you saw this morning? We've been told already, muttered Gracie. In multiple conversations with varying details from different people. Let's all be told the same thing. Go on, Kate. Kate shuffled forward to the front of her sofa, hands clasped as if in prayer. Raj and I saw a bunch of missiles flying towards New London. The Cerberus system destroyed them before they got there. But it means, if they wanted to wipe out Grant, Alex interrupted, they should have just detonated a nuclear device in the upper atmosphere and caused an electromagnetic pulse. Would have fried all their circuits forever. You watch too many movies in the old world, Jack interrupted, flicking his fingers together to aid his thinking, stimming as he called it. If an EMP attack were close enough to affect their circuits, it'd be close enough to just wipe out. Alex, Jack, let her finish, Ewan said. He noticed a little smile of gratitude on Kate's face. So none of the missiles got through, she continued, but it means someone's declared war on Grant. Might be more than one country, we don't know. That's it, really. The room fell silent, until Ewan noticed McCormick nodding at someone behind him. When he turned, Shannon had lifted a finger to speak. She repeated everything she had told Ewan on their journey home, how nobody with any sense would attack her father unless the task would become literally impossible later. With AME just days from being operational, the world had launched a last gasp attack on her father, and they had failed. Naturally, the conversation led to the test centre at Oakenfold. The other teenagers, Ewan's last surviving free schoolmates, looked understandably emotional. For some of them, that building had been the one place in the world where life had made sense, where Silent Simon had been treated more than just the Downs kid, and was recognised for the pleasant, non-verbally sociable person he was, where Gracie had been more than just the girl with global development delay, and people had tried to meet her halfway rather than judge her. The place that had accommodated Jack after his suicide attempts. The reactions on their faces reflected the love they had all had for Oakenfold Special School. Going by the lack of surprise on his face, McCormick still remembered everything he had been told about the matter that morning. That surprised Ewan. His collapse could only have been an hour or two after Alex had broken the news to him. When Shannon ran out of words, McCormick took centre stage again. If Shannon is right about the deadline being midnight on the 20th, this doesn't leave us with much time. So make no mistake, this will be an intense few days involving 2 missions. Oh yeah, this has definitely been mentioned before. I don't think it's been mentioned in this chapter. The presumed plan is for Nicholas Grant to raise the shield at midnight on May the 20th, because May the 20th is the anniversary on Takeover Day, which also happens to be Nicholas Grant's birthday. If Shannon is... involving 2 missions. The first will be a visit to Oakenfold, to learn as much as we can about atmospheric metallurgic excitation, how it works, how the shield is activated, and most importantly, how to destroy it. The strike team will consist of... No, said Mark. You don't get to decide this one. Most of the room shot surprised glances at Mark, who sat in his usual pose but with his hands noticeably tense. Ewan wasn't surprised at the interruption at all. If Mark hadn't done it, he would have spoken up himself. This is our school they've taken over, Mark continued. It's us who should take it back. Besides, we're the ones who know the place. We know its layout and its weak points better than any of Grant's people. There's only one strike team that can possibly do this. He pointed his index finger at each former student in clockwise order. Raj, Gracie, Simon, Jack, Kate, Ewan, and me. We'll be doing this one. The room looked back at McCormick, who, in true McCormick fashion, was smiling. I absolutely agree, he said. You've named the exact lineup I had in mind. My suggestion is that you all get some rest now, because you'll be setting out tonight and striking in the early hours of tomorrow morning. This leaves Alex and Shannon on comms, as Lorraine and I will be unavailable. She'll start her operation as soon as you leave, so by the time you're home tomorrow, I should be awake again. And on the night of the 19th, I'll be ready for action. McCormick had said his final sentence with an air of optimism, but it was met with a deathly silence. He'd better not be saying what I think he's saying. Ready for action? Asked Raj. Yes, on the 19th, we'll need to find a way into New London, then raid the upper floors and wipe out every trace of AME we find. It's a tall order, I know, and it will take place higher up in New London than we've ever reached before. But if we don't manage it, we lose the war. But you, asked Raj again, you ready for action? No disrespect, but how old are you, 70? 64. Oh, that's okay then. I've been to New London before, said McCormick. Just once, but I've been. Besides, the kings of old were always on the battlefield for the conflicts that won or lost their wars. It was expected of them. Even in World War II, the generals joined their privates on the D-Day beaches. It wasn't like the leaders of today who watch drones on TV from thousands of miles away. Ewan could feel rage and helplessness creeping into his mind, and his eyes began to twitch as if tempted to cry. Thomas, who must have been daydreaming through McCormick's words, laughed about something to do with generals and their privates. Sorry, said Alex, clearly not sorry at all. But there's a reason kings and generals don't go into combat now. By the time they're 64, they know they're past it. Lorraine thinks so too, unless I have my cyst removed. I was lucky enough to get through that mission in December without it bothering me inside the Citadel, but I haven't risked going back since. And it's touch and go whether I'll even be better in time, so the sooner it's taken out, the better. Ewan had no idea what touch and go was supposed to mean, but he found him. I actually still don't, at the age of 38. But he found himself hoping that McCormick would have a very, very slow recovery. A whole week in the clinic would be worth it to keep the old man away from New London, from the thousands of clones that would try to kill him, and from Oliver Roth. Half a year in bed would be worth it. He had not thought about that December mission since it had happened, but it had been bloody scary at the time. McCormick had left the house with Mark, Sally, and Rachel. all of whom had been Oakenfold students, and none of whom Ewan trusted to keep him safe. As if to prove Ewan's point, to date, McCormick had outlived two of them. Yeah, if you haven't heard of Sally and Rachel, they died before the books begin. Since Ewan himself was still recovering from an ammo raid, he had been left at Spitfire's Rise with nothing but his fears to keep him company. McCormick had eventually returned, unharmed against the odds, but in tremendous pain thanks to that cyst. And once he had arrived home, he had returned to the sight of Ewan smashing up the boy's bedroom from anxiety. Ewan brought himself back to the present. He had spent so much time dealing with his own reaction that he had not thought to look at his friends. When he lifted his head from his knees, he found Simon even shakier than normal, Raja's hands clasped as if in prayer, and yes, I know I've used that analogy twice in the same chapter, very clumsy of me. Jack's fingers buried in his dishevelled hair, and lazy Gracie actually giving a damn. No wonder Lorraine hadn't turned up to the meeting. What the hell makes you think Lorraine's qualified to perform operations? Asked Mark. What makes any of us qualified soldiers? In these times, we take what we can get. Lorraine's surgical performance may make the difference between us destroying the AME project and us losing the war, and I can't think of anyone I trust with the task more than her. So, on the 19th, barring any unexpected injuries, the strike team will consist of myself, Ewan, and at least two others, who I'll decide later, depending on who's still alive after Oakenfold, thought Ewan. If I can bring more than four of us, I will, McCormick continued, but it looks doubtful given my entry plan. We can hardly use the water treatment centre again, so I've had to think outside the box. Any questions? Nobody asked a question, not even about his entry plan. Ewan suspected nobody felt able to, and they were all as stunned as him. Then I'm calling this meeting to a close, McCormick finished. Oakenfold students, I know you'll have a lot on your minds, but try to spend today in the most relaxed way you can. McCormick's smile was warm and sympathetic as the room's population started to gradually drift. Ewan sat still the longest, and was the only one to notice McCormick's changing expression as his teammates left. The warm smile dropped, and his eyes grew wide. McCormick was as scared as everyone else. End of chapter 3.
Okay. For a minute, I had never considered the possibility that maybe during this Underdog series, the entire series, not just this part, we can lose McCormick too. And this is now, I'm wondering if you are now planning that and getting the readers ready for that. I don't know. Steph, if you're listening, have you read the other parts?
Yeah, I won't say anything other than pointing out that, as has been proven in the Underdog series already, no character is 100% safe. I mean, I don't like killing people for gratuitous reasons just because, haha, violence, haha, shock factor, and so on. But at the same time, I don't believe in plot armor. I think that even the really important characters should at least stand a realistic risk of something bad happening to them, perhaps even being killed.
But he's the only father figure. He's the only father figure, kind of like
yeah, he basically is, perhaps grandfather figure. But
okay,
yeah, and more than that, he's kind of the soul of the Underdogs.
Yes,
that's why everyone was absolutely terrified. Can you imagine a Spitfire's Rise without McCormick?
I can't. I don't think the characters can either, but
he's been pretty much their only source of consistency in the last year. Say again, sorry?
I'm not going to be happy with you if McCormick goes away. I'm telling you that.
That's the thing. Being the Underdogs author and having direct conversations with fans sounds very much like, if you hurt Ewan, I'll hate you forever. If Kate dies, then we're never speaking again. If Charlie dies, then I'm going to send you hate mail. If no one's actually threatened that, thankfully. If McCormick dies, then I'm going to stop reading the series. If Thomas dies, then this, that, the other, and it's and people are very protective of all 13 Underdogs, now 12 Underdogs. And it's
because we relate to it personally, I think, on some levels we see ourselves in each of those characters. So, but McCormick, no, no.
When I invented the character of McCormick, I wanted him. I basically based him on the kind of man that I wanted to be in 40 years' time. which is now the kind of man I want to be in less than 30 years' time. But, well, not quite, because, well, McCormick, as far as we're aware, is non-autistic. He may be a mathematics lecturer, but he's non-autistic as far as I know. Okay, chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
McCormick opened the door to the cellar and descended the steps with a hand on the banister. His feet were trembling too much for him to trust his balance. When he arrived in the cellar, which doubled as the Underdogs' armory, he saw Ewan already prepared. Clothes, weapons, everything. The assembly time was 10 o'clock that night, another 5 minutes away. But knowing Ewan, he must have wanted some time away from the others. For a leader, he needed a lot of moments to himself. McCormick could not see Ewan's face as it fixated on the memorial wall, now 21 names long. The dead Underdogs had outnumbered the living for a while. What was that thing you used to say to Thomas? Ewan asked without turning around. You kept saying it to him after Beth died. I said plenty of things to that boy after he lost his mum. It was something about how missing her would be painful, but not a bad thing. McCormick nodded and made his way to Ewan's side. Before he spoke, he took a look around the cellar for Ewan's sake to make sure that they were alone. No doubt the lad had established that nobody was in the farm next door or the generator room, but it was best to double-check. Finding nobody, McCormick repeated the words as he joined his lead soldier in staring at the memorial wall. This is pretty much the catchphrase for the whole of Underdogs Tooth and Nail. The pain of missing someone is always worth it for the joy of having known them. Always. Yeah, that was it. Where did you hear that? I have to admit, McCormick said with a smile, I made it up myself. Well, so did I after my granny died. The same year that I wrote this book. It was a lesson I learned after Barbara died. As much as it hurt to lose her, I'd take that pain all over again. If mourning is the natural cost of love, then it's a cost worth paying. When he looked towards Ewan, he saw his disengaged expression. Maybe the lad couldn't apply positive thought to the deaths of his family. Or Charlie. Oh yeah, Ewan lost his whole family on takeover day. And Charlie 3 weeks ago. Why? McCormick asked. What are you thinking? Because right now, I've reached Ben Christie, Ewan answered. I need to remember something about him. McCormick gazed at the memorial wall and found Ben Christie towards the bottom of the list. Only Rachel Watts, Daniel Amopoulos, and Charlie Coleman had died after him. How come? He asked. Because a few weeks ago, I watched my best friend become nothing more than a chiseled name in a slab of rock, Ewan said, pointing a twitching finger at Charlie's name. And once I saw it, I realised how easy it would be to forget who these people really were. So now, every time I look at this, I read down the list and I try to remember something about each person. McCormick knew that smiling wouldn't be the reaction Ewan wanted, but he found his young friend's attitude touching. He hid the smile as well as he could, as Ewan pointed to the top of the wall and reeled off some memories. Sarah Best used to help Kate when she got anxious in French. They weren't even friends, but she helped anyway. Callum Turner came up with the Oakenfold Code. The problems are not the person. We all adopted it, and the teachers are proud of him for coming up with it at the age of 12. Joe Horn always joked about being best in the school at chess club, even though he never reached a semi-final. Then there's Elaine, Arian, and Tamor. They deserve to be remembered for more than just dying on Jack's generator mission. Ewan turned to McCormick, revealing the redness in his face. Remember a few weeks ago, he snarled, when I yelled at you for not adding the Rolands? 3 good people died in New London helping us get out of the inner city, and they didn't even become chisel marks. They didn't become bloody anything. And I don't want to forget them either. If they mean that much to you, it's too late now. You've already had Charlie, and he died after them. I'm scared about what's going to happen next. Scared? McCormick thought. Have I ever heard him use that word before? You're taking a stupid risk, Ewan said with watery eyes, anger and love blending in his voice. If Lorraine's hand twitches at the wrong time, your name's next on this list. Whether you die on the operating table or somewhere in New London with his stitches ripped open, if you meet a clone that's faster than you, your name's next on this list. If... Ewan's sentence collapsed. McCormick tried to take advantage of the silence, but couldn't find anything to say. His lead soldier was absolutely right. Don't you dare become just a chiseled name in a bloody rock, Ewan managed to continue. Other than my dad, you're the only man I've ever trusted. You're not allowed to mean that much to someone just to die on them. Don't you dare do that to me. McCormick closed his eyes. As a mathematician, he knew the logical response. As a human, he didn't want to hurt a young man who meant so much to him. But as a leader, he knew there were some situations that were impossible to get right. He chose to just be honest. Ewan, I will keep myself on this planet for as long as I can, for you and the others. But if it ever came down to a choice between staying alive for you or dying for millions of prisoners, you understand that I have to choose the greater good. That's why we're fighting this war. Ewan turned back to the wall with a cold expression on his face. McCormick heard other people's footsteps at the top of the stairs and realised how little time he had. Ben Christie was a terrible singer, he said. He used to randomly burst into song, and whenever Thomas told him to shut up, he'd smile and sing louder. Ewan gave a barely visible smirk and nodded. McCormick watched as Ewan's gaze dropped to the last three names, Rachel, Daniel, then Charlie, and then relaxed himself. Truth be told, Ewan seemed more relaxed than McCormick. How do we know this wall won't have all our names on it one day? McCormick thought to himself. Is there truly a chance of anyone here becoming more than just a chiselled name in a bloody rock? No, this war won't end like that. We won't let it. One way or another, this memorial wall will never be full. The voice of defiance buoyed him, but McCormick knew it was only guaranteed to be true because there would be nobody left to chisel in the final name. The Dio-controlled crew came down the stairs. It didn't take long for all 7 students to ready themselves, with everything from assault rifles and knives to radios and lighters. It may have been a mission that impacted them personally, but it was encouraging to see them driven by vengeful enthusiasm rather than fear. The comms team, Alex and Shannon, joined them in the crowded circle, and they all linked hands around the memorial wall. To honour those who gave everything they had, said McCormick, we will give everything we have. To honour the dead, we will free the living, united by our differences. United, came the response, but it sounded different to normal. Some of the students, including Mark and Raj, had said it emphatically, like they were preparing for a fight to take their whole world back. Ewan and Kate had barely whispered, and McCormick noticed that their eyes had glanced towards him. They were afraid of what would happen to him once they left. It was an unusual feeling, having his worries reciprocated. Normally when his soldiers left, he would hope and pray that he was not saying a final goodbye to them. This time his young fighters feared the same for him too. 9 underdogs went into the exit tunnel, with not one word spoken between them. Simon gave a worried look towards McCormick, and Raj gave a hopeful thumbs up. Gracie looked like she was trying to avoid the sight of him altogether. They were gone a moment later, leaving McCormick in a Spitfire's rise he did not recognise, one that lay completely silent. In fact, yeah, if 9 of them are gone, doesn't that just leave him, Lorraine, and Thomas? Yeah, it must be. In order to break that silence, the first place he visited was the living room. Thomas was there, spread out on the empty sofa with his face buried into the backrest. He should have been in bed an hour earlier, but McCormick didn't mind. The boy had spent the entire day processing the news of the operation and still needed more time. Thomas, he said. What? Came the 9-year-old's whisper. I'm going to the clinic in a few minutes. Just thought to say good night. Good night. There was no expression in Thomas's voice. He was giving the response expected of him, the next line in the script. Once in a while, he would leap at McCormick and cling onto him like some kind of cuddly leech, keeping his thin arms wrapped around his chest until he had been told to let go at least 3 times. It was problematic for an aging man, but on principle, McCormick never objected. At that moment, a hug attack from Thomas would have been most welcome. McCormick was frightened, more frightened than he wanted any of his underdogs to know. But there would be no hugs that day. Thomas, like most of the crowd in the cellar, despised him that day. McCormick sighed and walked to the foot of the stairs. I love you, Thomas, and I'll see you tomorrow. Mum used to say that. It wasn't worth pushing the issue. McCormick left the living room and made his way up the stairs. If only to delay the inevitable, he opened the trapdoor to the attic and pulled down the ladder. There must have been enough time to see Barbara. He would forever be thankful to his old friend Polly for letting him lodge in her house after Barbara's death. She couldn't possibly have predicted her home would become a place like Spitfire's Rise. McCormick's most treasured possessions had been in Polly's attic long before takeover day, just meters above a house full of people who had no idea he had any prior link to the house at all. He found the cardboard box in its place next to the boiler, and, as always, picked out the Anglesey honeymoon photo first. Oh, that doesn't quite read quite as well when our house has just had a boiler replaced. And yeah, I used to think that boilers were like placed in the attic, but no, it turns out they're not in most houses. I'm thinking of kind of the water tank, but I digress. When he knelt down to grab it, his arm brushed past a second cardboard box. Momentarily distracted, he checked inside it to see if the envelopes were still there, and counted 11 as expected. He wondered how many would remain when the time came to hand them out. And no, you don't know what that means? Maybe you will, later on. He brought his attention back to his late wife. There was surprisingly little to say to her. On the brink of going under the knife, in a house where all the occupants were angry with him, only one topic came to mind. That's the worst thing about leadership, Barb, he began. They can train you to teach, and they can train you to guide people, but they can never train you to deal with the loneliness. He kissed the part of the photo which held Barbara's face and returned it to the cardboard box. Once it was back in place, he had run out of excuses. It was time to face Lorraine. And it was not the end of the chapter, but the end of the scene. And are McCormick and Lorraine together or not? Just while that's on the screen. Well, honestly, I leave that to the reader's decision. I know that they're very close friends. They have a lot in common, and they're both uncompromising about what they believe is right and wrong, and they're both kind of a similar generation as well, and they do very much care about each other. I haven't decided whether they're properly together. I suppose in my head they're probably not, but I have no objections if anyone reads this series and in their headcanon, yes, McCormick and Lorraine are together. I'm just going to leave that to you. I have my own opinions about it. Lorraine could be an intimidating person, but never more so than now. McCormick lay flat on the clinic bed wearing nothing but his underwear, as the Underdogs nurse marched to and fro across the clinic in an understandably foul mood. She opened the top drawer of a dulled filing cabinet that had once held McCormick's student assessment data. Now it held Lorraine's emergency medical supplies, some of it in sealed jars that had dusted over from months of idle storage. Lorraine's hand emerged with an unused bottle of clear liquid, and she readied her syringe. I never thought I'd use expired drugs on a patient, she mumbled with a weak tremor. McCormick had a couple of humorous comebacks in mind, mainly about how he'd never paid attention to use-by dates on food, but he knew the process would be more tolerable if he only spoke when asked a question. So how much do you weigh? She asked. Still 84 kilograms. Not 83 or 85? Well, we might have weakened all the springs on the scales by weighing ourselves too much, he said with a chuckle. Do you definitely weigh 84 kilograms? Yes, I do. So 1 kilogram makes a difference, does it? If you give the wrong amount of anesthetic to a patient, you could kill them. If you give a child an adult's dose, they don't wake up. I have to calculate how much to give you based on your age, height, weight, body mass index, and general state of health, and I can't afford to get it wrong. A teaspoon too much can cause permanent brain damage. She poked the syringe through the bottle's foil cap and spent nearly a whole minute measuring the correct amount, tapping the syringe to get any bubbles to the top, then squirting and remeasuring. Eventually, she seemed satisfied and turned to McCormick with a loaded syringe. And all of this, she continued, so you can go running around in New London and probably get yourself killed. If I get killed and we destroy the AME project, I know you don't want to hear this, but that's a win, an extremely good one. It'll be a better win if the shield dies and you don't. Oh, obviously, said McCormick, suppressing the nerves in his voice. And that's the result I'm aiming for. I don't want to die, Lorraine. I want to go out on the 19th, run around and shoot clones, get out alive and make it home again. But that involves risk, as war always does. Has it occurred to you that you'll be under the same roof as Nicholas Grant, Marshall and Pierce, Oliver Roth, and just days after an operation? This crossed my mind, McCormick answered, staring up to the ceiling to avoid Lorraine's glare. But have you read the AME report? It's terrifying. I have to be there for this, Lorraine. I can't just sit at comms while the young ones do the dying. That's what cowards and presidents do. There's no shame in recognizing your limits. No, but there's shame in accepting them. Lorraine did not reply, and McCormick breathed a sigh of relief. Tired of conversation and fatigued from debating the issue, he stretched out his right arm and invited the needle towards his skin. The inside of his lower arm was still dotted with minuscule scars from 40 years of blood donations. He was no stranger to needles. Just promise me you're not looking for trouble, said Lorraine. I promise I'm doing the right thing. That's enough. No, it's not. If I do this, you have a duty to keep yourself alive and uncaptured. McCormick gave a warm smile. Their two principled minds had done nothing but clash ever since his collapse, but beneath their differences, they were the closest of friends. I'll do everything I can to stay out of trouble, he said. And believe me, I won't just be doing it for you. I've got my own vested interest in staying alive. Lorraine took a deep breath, and in the seconds it took to find a vein and insert the needle, McCormick tried to forget the enormity of the operation. His friend was using expired anesthetics to help him to sleep, and then she was going to carve him open with a sharpened kitchen knife. All this without any surgical training and a selection of memories that remained from her nursing years. And at the end of it all, there was the soldering iron that lay at the back of the room. The very sight of it made him shudder. When the time came, a prick in his arm caught his attention, and he turned his head just in time to see the last of the colourless fluid vanishing into him. McCormick's nervous system began to numb itself, and his last conscious sight was of Lorraine's eyes as she began to cry. End of chapter 4.
How are we
Would you
doing
like
time?
Would you like one more chapter? Because we've only been doing this for 40 minutes.
We can do one. I mean, if you have time.
Yeah?
All right, let's go ahead. Because I don't want to leave and not know.
Yeah, sure. Right. I'm not sure I saw all the comments that were left. Did any of the comments take the form of questions?
No, you answered the last question.
Okay. Right, so finishing tonight with chapter 5. And yes, this will be the last chapter of the night. It doesn't end on a cliffhanger, don't worry. But the beginning of chapter 6 is basically the beginning of a specific chunk of the story that can't really start without continuing.
Thank you.
So yeah, chapter 5 is the right place to end. Chapter 5. A year and a half ago, during one of his worst meltdowns, Ewan had found a way to escape Oakenfold. Oh yeah, by the way, this definitely isn't based absolutely on something that actually happened in a school I used to work at. It had been a ridiculous strategy. In his unthinking rage, he had run outside, lumbered up to the gate, and pressed the buzzer, an idea which the rational Ewan would never have considered. The receptionist assumed it was a class heading out for a PE lesson, and had buzzed him out without checking the CCTV screen. It had taken the rest of the day for anyone to find him. Maybe they had assumed he had run into Harpenden to take a bus somewhere, but Ewan hadn't been stupid enough to surround himself with the general public. All he needed to do, all he had the mental strength to do, was find a hiding spot on a nearby hill that overlooked the school and stay there until transport home arrived at the end of the day. It had seemed like a good idea at the time. Once he had calmed down and realised how much trouble he had got himself into, he had spent the afternoon searching for the perfect vantage point, one where he could watch the panicked staff running in and out of the gates, the entertained students looking on from the windows, the police cars coming and going, and his mother's arrival when the school finally called and admitted they'd lost her son. It had taken long enough, but that day's troubles were finally worth it. Ewan and his team knew exactly where to hide outside Grant's AME test centre. He hadn't liked the prospect of walking the whole way around Harpenden rather than through it, as it added miles to his team's journey. But it wasn't like they were short on time. They had about 10 minutes walking left to do, and several hours of waiting would follow. Ewan turned around to look at his friends, expecting them to be weary and exhausted. It was nearly midnight after all. Instead, he found them just as determined as they had been at Spitfire's rise, but without the additional air of worry that McCormick had given them. Out of sight really was out of mind. Raj and Kate were at the back of the group, whispering to each other. Ewan decided to keep away from them when he noticed their hands were joined. Mark was towards the front, overtaking Ewan whenever he got the chance. Whether he was hurrying the group or trying some kind of power play, Ewan neither knew nor cared. In the middle was the trio Ewan almost didn't notice, Silent Simon being straight-faced and apprehensive, a world apart from the smiling, humorous boy he had been at Oakenfold. Lazy Gracie, who did and said as little as possible, allowing herself to be led by people she considered superior to herself. And Jack, who was fiddling his fingers and most likely daydreaming again, all planning for all possible outcomes. Sometimes the line between the two was blurry for him. Ewan, came a whisper from Raj, audible from a distance in the silent countryside. Ewan turned around to find Raj holding up his mobile phone and battery. He nodded, and Raj prepared to phone comms. Mark, he said. Time Raj, 3 minutes. It got rid of the icy giant breathing down his neck. Mark huffed, but did as he was told. Once the phone was switched on, Grant's technology would take a minimum of 3 minutes to detect its location. Calls to the comms unit were never long. With Mark at the back of the group timing her boyfriend, Kate ran up to Ewan. How are you doing? Ewan asked. Me? Wait, yeah, that's right. How are you doing? Ewan asked. Me? Answered Kate. I'm an expert at conquering my demons. I'm fine. I was wondering how you were. There was a clear waviness in her voice. Kate was nervous, but rushing in headlong. Life experience had taught her that the only way of destroying her fears was to do the things she was scared of, so the mission was right up her street. She'd be fine. Ewan, she said, how are you feeling? Kind of conflicted, to be honest, he answered. Back at home, it was obvious why Grant took Oakenfold. He wanted to make us feel pressured into taking the school back, but also scared of doing it. Logically, we just need to tell ourselves not to be sentimental and use our knowledge of the school to our advantage. But it's different now we're this close. Oakenfold meant something to us, said Kate. There's no shame in feeling emotional about going back. Yes, there is. Emotional distractions could mean death. Ewan looked behind him. Raj was deep in conversation with either Alex or Shannon, and Mark held up 2 fingers to represent 2 minutes left. I'll be fine once we stopped hiding, he said. It's just this particular hiding place. Was this where you hid the day you escaped school? Yeah, and wow, that backfired. Still can't shake Mum's reaction from my head. When we got home, he shook his head, unwilling to continue. Kate seemed surprised. You lived with your mum? Yeah, don't most people? I just assumed it was you and your dad. I mean, you talk about your dad all the time, but I've never heard you mention her. Ewan shuddered. Bloody hell, that hurt. As if the pressure of approaching an occupied Oakenfold wasn't enough, a girl he had lived with for almost a year had opened his eyes to something awful, one of the worst results of his avoidance habit. Please tell me I haven't gone for a whole year without mentioning my mother. I must have at least thought of her. Dad got our weapons, he answered. That's the main reason I've talked about him, I guess. What were they like? Kate, you're my friend and everything, but please just shut up. Complete opposites of each other. You couldn't imagine 2 people being so different. They say opposites attract, but maybe their opposite genes mixed so badly that they gave birth to the ultimate screw-up. Kate opened her mouth, but Raj cut in before she could protest. I told them we're striking at 3, said Raj. That's still true, right? Yeah, thanks. Raj fell to the back of the group, and Kate went with him. Ewan had just enough time to breathe half a sigh of relief before someone else picked up the conversation. You want some advice? Asked Jack. From someone else with a dead mum? Ewan hadn't even known Jack was listening. In most conversations, it was difficult to tell the difference between when he was concentrating and when he was daydreaming. In both cases, he looked away from people and flicked his fingers. As a child, it had led to adults talking about Jack as if he weren't in the room. Apparently, non-autistic people thought his ears only ever worked in conjunction with his eyes. Ewan's mouth opened, but he reined in his impulses and stopped himself before telling Jack to mind his own damn business. In all fairness, his thoughts are always worth a listen. I was 12 when Mum died, said Jack. I didn't talk about it for a long time. Surprised I even told you when I did, to be honest. A cancer death's different from being sprayed with bullets, Jack. You didn't see the moment she turned into a corpse. I'm not competing with you, Ewan. If I were, I'll tell you how long and drawn out my mum's pain was compared to yours. I'm talking about the aftermath. Maybe you don't mention her because the memory of her death is too painful, but I've heard you mention everyone else who died that day, including little Alfie, his 8-year-old cousin. So I'm going to guess your relationship with your mum was a little complicated. You mentioned advice, Jack? Yeah, don't let things rot. Ewan threw a glance at Jack, looking as confused as his face would let him, although he suspected Jack wouldn't see his confusion in the dark. When I was about 15, Jack continued, I realised I couldn't remember a voice. You know my memory, Ewan. It's spectacular. Every fact about dinosaurs I learned as a child I can still regurgitate now, but I can't remember stuff when I spend years shutting it out. Ewan took a moment to see if he could remember his own mother's voice. He was afraid Jack might be right. I didn't want to deal with the hurt, Jack continued, but when I realised what I was forgetting, I changed. I decided the hurt was worthwhile. Bring on the pain, if it keeps her alive in my head. Ewan nodded and gave an answer that didn't reference his mother. McCormick says something similar, he said, one of his little catchphrases. The pain of missing someone is always worth it. For the joy of having known them, finished Jack. And he's right. I don't know what kind of relationship you had with her, but keep it alive. Even if it means have to stop you, Jack, we've arrived. The hiding spot was still in the distance, but it was a convenient excuse to withdraw from the conversation. The vantage point was a crater next to the hill's peak, surrounded by trees. An elevated view with excellent cover. Ewan approached, knowing what sights would await them once they reached the brow of the hill. And there it was, Oakenfold Special School. Oakenfold, where the world had made just a little more sense, where people either knew how to accommodate students with special needs or at least gave a crap about trying. Oakenfold, where the problems were not the person. In order to cope with his own reaction, Ewan looked at his friends' faces for theirs, but each of them echoed his own feelings, complete and utter confusion. He had expected Oakenfold to look like a military compound lit up with floodlights, with armed checkpoints and vehicle barriers and so on. What they found was just their old school, with no extra construction work and the lights turned out. It was like Grant's employers had gone home for the night. This place can't possibly be unguarded, said Mark. Maybe they want us to think it is, answered Gracie. It was a clever comment coming from her. There'll be at least a minimal guard somewhere, Ewan said. Maybe even inside. So let's be stealthy. Go as long as you can without firing a shot. Do we even have to wait until 3? Asked Raj. Doesn't look like it's getting any quieter, and we're giving them 3 hours to spot us up here. We stick to the plan. In New London, the watches start and end every 6 hours. 3 and 9 in the morning, 3 and 9 at night. They'll do the same here too. Consistency and all that. Bit of a leap of faith, isn't it? I didn't think you liked those. We stick to the plan, Ewan repeated impatiently. We wait till 3, sneak in while the guard changes, and we grab all the information on AME we can get our hands on. After we learn what we'll be up against in New London, we wipe out every physical trace of the technology from Oakenfold. He hesitated before finishing a sentence. Even if it means burning our school to the ground. End of scene, quick drink. And 3 pages left. Bloody hell, comms is boring, especially when your partner's silent. When it came to missions, Alex preferred being on the comms end of the phone. He was less likely to die that way. And Mark had been right. The Oakenfold mission belonged to the students and them alone. Still, a little action would have been appreciated, or at least something happening, even if it were just a conversation with Shannon. It was the early hours of the morning, and she was sitting upright in a chair, dutiful and focused, as if she had restructured her sleeping pattern specifically for that night. It made Alex feel ashamed of his own tiredness. I wonder if McCormick's still alive, he thought. If the operation were going to go wrong, it would have happened by now. Alex shook his head and tried to think optimistic thoughts. In all probability, Lorraine had probably sealed him up with that soldering iron and cried herself to sleep. He needed something to distract himself. With nothing to do, his mind would start to mull over all the worst possibilities. He had once heard someone say that's how it worked for Kate, except it seemed more painful for her. There was only one distraction available, and she didn't seem in the mood for talking, especially not about the subject Alex had in mind. But it was worth a try. So, Shannon. Already Alex was wondering whether it was a good idea. It struck him how little he and Shannon had in common. In fact, he knew so little about her that he didn't even know whether they had anything in common. He wasn't sociable in the getting to know you sense, more in the take the mix sense, and Shannon hardly spoke to him unless the conversation was necessary. Better ask then. I've been wondering for a while. I hope you don't mind me asking, but what was he like? Shannon looked piercingly into his eyes. Ouch, no wonder the autistic lot find that painful. Who? Your father, the great Nicholas Grant. She didn't answer at first. She just let the question hang in the air like the smell of a carcass. Does it matter? She eventually asked. In a rare display of shyness, Alex backed down. I suppose it doesn't. He was a monster, she said. I never heard him talk because he only shouted. He smashed up my room whenever he got drunk. He only fed me when I obeyed him. He once had a barbecue with all my childhood toys and performed a ritual to our overlord Satan while rocking out to death metal and stealing candy from puppies. Is that what you want to hear? Alex was ashamed that for the first few sentences he had actually believed her. I didn't see that much of him, Shannon said. That's the truth. Around the time I left primary school, he got into Marshall Pierce and spent his days building up his takeover project. So he didn't abuse you? Well, bloody Alex, you're crap with social boundaries. Alex looked away, pretending to have heard something. Shannon didn't fall for it. It was neglect, I guess, which is a type of abuse. There was a big empty hole where my father should have been. And everything he did after takeover day, all the luxuries he showered me with to get me back, it made no difference. Gifts mean nothing when they come from an invisible man. She rested back in her chair and let out an enormous huff. If it makes you feel better, said Alex, my dad was an arse. He was more my taekwondo coach than my dad. I think I'd rather have a guy who wasn't there instead of a guy who thought comfort zones were something I wasn't allowed to have. Shannon didn't answer. Then again, I'm kind of glad he pushed me. Without the drive he gave me, I wouldn't have lasted long in this war. He's probably the reason why I preferred doing things alone, but maybe he's also the reason I'm still alive. Maybe my dad's the reason. She trailed off, and Alex decided not to chase the other half of the sentence. He had poked around enough for one night. The phone rang, and Shannon's hand shot to it first. Perhaps she wanted to leave the conversation more urgently than Alex did. Ewan's face appeared on the smartphone screen, but he spoke so quietly that Alex couldn't decipher his words. Yeah, replied Shannon. Okay, good luck. They're going in. Must be 3 o'clock already. Ewan said something else. Fine, Ewan, I know it's never luck. Just keep yourself safe. End of chapter 5.
There was nothing about McCormick in that chapter, Chris. You fooled me.
Well, it was written from Ewan and Alex's perspective, and they're in two completely different places. They have no idea what's happened back at Spitfire's Rise.
I guess
In
I'll
fact,
have to
I'm
wait.
curious.
But I
How
think
much further do? At what point do
it
you?
doesn't look like it's in the next chapter too. So,
It doesn't look like it's for a while, actually.
oh yeah, not in chapter 7. I'll have to wait. I might try reading it before. I'll not give any spoilers.
Oh, is that cheating?
Yeah, no, but with everything that's going on here, I don't think I will be able to. But if it
Yeah.
keeps bugging me, I don't I'm not making any promises. I might cheat. But
Far as I'm
anyway,
concerned, if you got a copy of the book, you have the right to read it or use it as toilet paper or anything in between. It's your book, your choice.
thank you, thank you. So for April, I don't think we'll be able to have a session in April, but we'll be able to have one in May. So I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you, can we
Mhm.
do, can we double up the session in May?
Possibly.
If that's
I'll have to
possible
check.
for you.
I'll have to check my calendar in May, but if I can, then I will.
All right, okay. I'll ask Aman to get in touch with you, and then we'll go from there. Is there any kind of a little teaser that you'd want to give for the session in May?
Don't know. Let's take a look. So, chapter 6. Such and such was lying, dying of gunshot wounds. So, oh wait, no, that was
Oh
completely a
my
joke. Don't worry.
God.
Uh, Actually, let's take a look. The next chapter is a Kate's chapter, and yeah, you already know what's how it's going to start. They're going to approach Oakenfold and begin the mission, and also there is kind of it's not actually a flashback chapter. I think during the Underdog series there are let's see, I think there's 3 flashback chapters. Yes, there's 3 of them. And then there's the one in the next chapter, which isn't literally a flashback chapter because it doesn't like stop the action and go back in time. It's more like Kate reminiscing about Takeover Day. So in the next chapter, not only do you get the start of the mission, you get to see what Takeover Day was like from Kate's perspective as an Oakenfold student.
That's interesting. I always
Mm.
like to see how Kate perceives things or sees things
Mm.
because Kate's one of my favorite characters, if I haven't told you already before. But that being
She
said,
usually wins the poll as to who's your favourite underdog.
Kate's the famous one, then, huh?
Pretty much, although I think the last time I held a poll like that, I think Ewan edged her out by 1 vote. That surprises me, really.
Well, it's kind of like a tie between you and Kate, if you think about it.
Mm, For me, I think Kate is my either 4th or 5th favorite character, even though love her to bits. Amazing character, really proud of how I've managed to develop her. But it's just that there are so many others that I love. My favorite is Jack. My second favorite is McCormick. My third wasn't originally Ewan. Like at this point in the series, Ewan's not my third favorite character. I think he's like number 5. But as the series goes on, the standings and the rankings kind of change. But by the end of the whole series,
Don't give us the
Jack's
rankings because you're giving us the spoiler who's alive and
no,
who's not.
no, I'm really not. I'm really
Okay.
not
Okay.
because Charlie is my 6th favorite underdog. Even at the end of the series, he is my 6th favorite. So
Okay.
this gives no indications to who lives, who doesn't, etc., etc. But across the
Okay.
entire series, my favorite underdog is Jack. Then it's McCormick. Then it's Ewan, and then I think it's Shannon. It's either Shannon or Kate. And I think the further you get through the series, the more I like Shannon. I haven't yet decided whether she's kind of overtaken Kate, but those are basically my big 5. Although I really, really do have a soft spot for Charlie, and I was writing book 4 and still feeling quite sad that I'd killed him in book 1. There was so much more that I could have done with him, except it would have been insulting to the reader to keep all the characters alive for as long as everyone wants them to stay alive for. So yeah.
A choice.
Hmm.
All right, then. I guess this is it. just a reminder, everyone, for those of who uh, for those of you who are in Texas, see, I'm mumbling my words now. We have two events coming up: Painting with a Purpose on April 11th, and Celebrating Neurodiversity on April 28th. So if you're in Texas, please come see us. Please be a part of these events. If you want to volunteer, if you want to get involved in any way, reach out to us, let us know. And that's it from our end. Chris, any parting words?
United by differences.
United by differences, yes. All right, everyone, take care. Bye bye.
Bye.